Well, we can get started. I've waited till a couple of minutes past the hour as I've been instructed. Welcome everyone to QAAFI's seminar series, and we've got another excellent seminar coming up today from Selina Fyfe, which I know has sparked a lot of interest amongst a number of people external to UQ as well. So welcome all of those who've joined us from elsewhere. My name is Heather Smyth, and I work in the Centre of Nutrition and Food Science with Selina and with my colleagues here at QAAFI. And I'm a flavour chemist and a sensory scientist, and today I will be facilitating this session with Selina. I'm one of her co-supervisors. Thanks, Selina. I'd like to, of course, start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the cultures of our First Nations people and their custodianship of the lands on which UQ operates. And we're thankful for the community that we share together now. We pay our respects particularly to the Yagara and Turrbal communities and their ancestors and descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connection to country. We recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society, and of course to the University of Queensland as well through our partnership in research that involves Indigenous foods. Just some housekeeping before we get into Selina's seminar, if I may. The seminar runs from 12 until 2. Please use the Q&A button that you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen here, the Q&A button, not the chat function, although we will be looking at that as well, to ask your questions, please, and I will go through those after Selina has finished. While she's talking though, if you have some questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat as Selina is speaking. I will now introduce Selina. I've got a little bit of a bio here for her. Of course, I know Selina very well. Selina is a PhD candidate from QAAFI's Centre for Nutrition and Food Science. Her PhD is on studying the Australian native green plum to understand nutrition and composition of the green plum with view to develop, I guess, industrial applications or business opportunities for the community. Selina works closely and has visited on a number of occasions communities in the Northern Territory to harvest the fruit for these studies. The green plum and other native fruits represent an opportunity for diet diversification across Australia and for Indigenous communities to also have meaningful employment on country and in their communities in a business or an opportunity involving Indigenous foods. Selina's work is now part of the ARC Training Centre for Uniquely Australian Foods, which is led by Professor Yasmina Sultanbawa. Prior to joining us here at QAAFI, Selina's been around for some time. She's done a master's with us as well. She was actually in medical science before changing to food science. Selina has a Bachelor of Applied Science in Medical Science from QUT, a graduate diploma in Divinity from ACT, a Master's of Public Health from JCU, and a Master of Food Science and Technology from UQ. She's a very accomplished young lady. And with no further ado, I'll hand over to you, Selina, and we'll enjoy your presentation.
Hi, Heather. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone who's joining us today. I really appreciate the support that I have on this project as well. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands that we're meeting on today, and also the lands that the green plums grow on and were harvested on, and to pay my respects to their ancestors and their descendants. So today I was trying to work out how to talk about the green plum, and I thought today I would talk about studying the green plum and talk about my story about studying the green plum, because studying it hasn't just been about going to a lab and doing science. There's been so much more to it than just science. Science is a big part of it. Science is really exciting. I love doing the food science, but there's also been Indigenous engagement and lots of paperwork to work out how to do it right and how to do it properly. So I thought I'd use this as an example of studying a bush food here in Australia. So the green plum grows across the top parts of the Northern Territory and Western Australia. And it's very, very popular where it grows. The Aboriginal people have been eating it for many, many generations. And it's a really important bush food in the Northern Territory. They eat it raw from the tree, and it's great just to be able to walk around and eat it straight off the tree. They also eat it sun-dried, how you would eat like a sultana. And also there has been that they've eaten it reconstituted as well. And the green plum is a very small fruit. It's just really tiny. It has quite a big seed inside. It grows in the family Anacardiaceae, which is the same family that we get the mango from, and also pistachio nuts and cashew nuts. So I started on the green plum as part of a research project in my Master of Food Science and Technology, which I did at SAFS, and I did the research project under Yasmina at QAAFI. But the green plums that we had were not quite ripe. So we didn't know a lot about green plums at that point in time. They had been sent to us. So we did the study, and the thing that we found most exciting though was in our studies on the green plum was the folate level. The green plum was really high in folate. It was also high in other macro minerals, and also it had trace elements as well. So we kind of went, wow, that's really interesting. I wonder what it's like when it's ripe. And then I also studied the antioxidant and the antimicrobial activity. And we found that these underripe ones had quite high antioxidant activity, and also really interesting antimicrobial activity against both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. So Yasmina said to me, would you like to do a PhD on the green plum now? And I said, yes, I would love to. So I started doing my PhD, which is on characterising the potential of the green plum, Buchanania obovata, as a native Australian fruit. And I work under Yasmina as my principal advisor, under Heather, who just introduced me, and under Horst Schirra at the Centre for Advanced Imaging here at UQ. And I have two international collaborators, Professor Michael Rychlik at Technical University of Munich, and he's also an honorary professor here at UQ, and Professor Philippe Schmitt-Kopplin at the Helmholtz Centre and Technical University of Munich, both over in Germany. And a part of the project was that I was going to be going over there to work with them in their labs, but COVID hit 4 days before I was due to fly out. So we've just been working over email and still collaborating and working together. But the first thing that we started looking at when looking at the green plum and looking at how to study the green plum was how to do it as responsible research. And the European Union Rome Declaration defines responsible research as the ongoing process of aligning research and innovation to the values, needs, and expectations of society. And it involves engagement of all societal actors, ethics, respect, governance using policy, having research integrity, and making science more sustainable, ethical, and socially beneficial. And this is what we wanted to do in the Green Plum project and with the bush foods. But I'm working on green plum, so I'm just talking about it through the green plum. So I had to get my head around, what does it mean? Where do we go? What paperwork do we need to do? How do we harvest samples? And how do we do it with Indigenous communities? So the framework that I came up with to understand was looking at Indigenous rights, international treaties, federal and state laws, ethics guidelines, and also we could do responsible research and innovation. In Indigenous rights, this is set by the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And in Australia here, we also have a community guide to this document so that we can understand it better. And the thing about Indigenous rights is that Article 31 gives them the right to maintain, control, protect, and develop their cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and their manifestations of their sciences, technologies, and cultures, including of their seeds and knowledge of the properties of fauna and flora. So this directly relates to our bush foods. They also have, they should have opportunities to improve their economic conditions and the right to determine and develop strategies for the development or use of their lands, and the right to the productive capacity of their land. Then we have international treaties that come from, or partly come from, the Indigenous rights, including the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Nagoya Protocol, as well as CITES and the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources. So all of these impact our studies on native plant foods, and particularly the CBD, which says that national governments have sovereign rights over natural resources, and the CBD brings in access to genetic resources must be on mutually agreed terms, prior informed consent, and sharing in a fair and equitable way the results of research and development. And we have federal and state laws which have been written, and they take into account the international treaties and the Indigenous rights. And for me, in the Northern Territory, and I've only got samples from the Northern Territory, that's the Northern Territory Biological Resources Act. The Queensland ones that are in my table have not been updated for the Queensland laws, which just got updated at the end of last year. So I did this near the start of my PhD, but the Northern Territory ones required that we have permits as well. There were also, there are other things to look at with native food studies, including native, tidal and Indigenous protected areas. And probably one of the things for us as food scientists is understanding what's biodiscovery or bioprospecting. And is this what we're doing or not? And in this case, no. There's also ethics guidelines and a real need to, I guess, do this work ethically. So the GERACE guidelines by AATSIS have been updated, and I haven't updated them on this slide yet. But the other ones that we were looking at was by the NHMRC, which mostly looks at medical research, but we didn't have other guidelines at that point in time. So I did some word analysis of what are the main themes to understand in all of these ethics guidelines. What comes through, and just by the number of times that the words have been used in these, what are the main themes that come through? And you can clearly see cultural and respect really, really stand out. And understanding how different our culture is, as I've gone through this project, I've learned a lot more about Aboriginal culture. Not to say that I know a lot, but I understand better, I guess, about how different it is and how interesting it is and how exciting. And probably one of the best books that I've had, and as well as going to Aboriginal communities, but is the book Song Spirals, which is about sharing women's wisdom of country through songlines by a Gayu group of women. And this has been written by, I'll just hold it up if you can, I don't know if you can see there, it's not coming through. Written by Aboriginal women up in the Yolngu area, the people group that I've worked with. And it really clearly talks about the culture, talks about the values, and talks about, for me as well, what I guess I understood from it was about country and what does it mean, what does country mean to these Aboriginal people. So the GERACE guidelines now I know have been updated, but looking at what is the role of Indigenous Australians in our research on bush foods. And in our research, we research alongside the Aboriginal people. We're not doing research on the people. At no point are we researching them. We see them as fellow researchers. They work alongside us. They have huge amounts of knowledge about their foods, and they know a lot. And we need to treat them as researchers, and we need to respect their culture and social practices, their knowledge and their rights as well. And I just wanted to point this one out, NHMRC Keeping Research on Track 2, because it has a really useful table about what are the researchers to us and what is the community organisation involvement in doing ethical conduct in researching with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their communities. So just a plug for that if you're interested in doing this research. So responsible research then is what we're trying to do. And we want to be able to make contributions to research, to economic growth and benefits to society. So what does it look like with the green plums? So responsible research with the green plums means that we have ethics approval. We have it for the sensory analysis that we've done because we are eating foods here in Brisbane, but also for the community work. And to get the ethics approval, we've had to have emails and all sorts of things done. We have permits from Northern Territory Parks and Wildlife. We do visits to the communities. And then when we're there, we have community meetings with the Yolngu people. And we meet also, I work with the Indigenous owners of Wild Orchard Kakadu Plum and meetings with them as well. So in the first trip that we did, we had 2 community meetings with the Yolngu people. And then the second trip, we had 3 community meetings. So meetings with the men's group, the ladies group, and also sharing results with high school students and with some of the rangers as well, the Aboriginal rangers. We also send community reports to the Indigenous communities and try to make those so that they're clear, written clearly, and so that they're, they've got the information, but in a way that's easily understood, so not too much scientific jargon. We do presentations of results to them, and also presentations to individuals in that community as well. And we always treat people with respect, and we harvest with the Indigenous community too. So I've had green plums in my project from 3 different harvest regions. From Delair, this region here, and working with David and Sharon Hewitt from Wild Orchard Kakadu Plum, from the areas around Darwin, and also from the area around this Gove Nullumbai area. And you can see in these photos, the trees are quite different. There's quite a variation in them. Some of them are very small. Interestingly, even the small ones often have fruit on them, and some of them grow really big to like really massive trees. And in East Arnhem land, in the Gove Nullumbai area, the green plum harvest is in December to January, and this is when it's summer and it's the wet season, and it's hot and it's humid. And I can say it's very hot and very humid. And the traditional owners are the Yolngu people, and they call the green plum Munjuj in Yolngu. And we've harvested with the Golkula Mining Company, which is an Indigenous owned mining company. And they also have a plant and rehabilitation nursery there. And we've also harvested with the Arnhem Land Progress Aboriginal Corporation in this area. And you can, and here are some of the staff from the Golkula Mining Company on our first trip, and we saw most of them again on the second trip as well, Mayla and Kevin and Renee and Anne-Marie, who have all helped us with harvesting. And this plant nursery were the first people to propagate the green plum trees. So what does a green plum taste like? We did sensory profiling, and these ones were on fresh whole green plums, and it was free choice profiling using a panel here at QAAFI. And our panel told us that the flavour of the ripe green plums is a sweet flavour that's fruity and slightly tart with notes of stewed pear, citrus and apricot. And they said it was delicious. They wanted to eat it again and again. It was highly acceptable. They liked it, they'd buy it, and it was tasty. And this is one thing about the green plums, is just how good it tastes. It's so delicious. And when you're harvesting, it's actually really difficult to put the green plums into the bag for research, because it's much, much better just to pop it in your mouth and eat them all. I've also done more research on them, sensory analysis. And I looked at them in yogurt as well, because a lot of fruits are used in yogurt. So I was trying to use a number of different ways of the green plum. What does it taste like? What's the aroma? What does it look like? So we can get really good and accurate vocabulary descriptions for what the green plum is, and also to look at ways that it could possibly be used by the Indigenous communities. And as a freeze-dried powder in yogurt, the flavour was described as stewed apple and sweet and citrus, with notes of fruity, dairy convection and herbaceous. And that dairy flavour comes from the yogurt. And we asked for the overall impression, and it was very, very positive. People really liked it. And I really liked it too. It tastes really good in yogurt. I'd love to keep eating it like that. Nutritionally, the ripe green plums are quite high in dietary fibre and also in potassium. And many of the fruit in the Anacardiaceae family are high in potassium, including the green plum. But it's also a really good fruit to have for other nutrients, and including some of the trace elements too. Our first interest from that first study was on the folates, and I've done quite a large study on folates as well. So I looked at ripe green plums from a number of different locations, 16 in fact, and you can see that there's some variation in the results, the total folate results, but they're all actually very high. This variation that we're seeing is similar to the range that you see in strawberries, which are known as a high folate fruit. And the green plum is actually much higher than most other fruit, including other tropical fruits, such as the mangoes, and they're around 60 to 75. Papayas, which are around 55 to 90, but it's not quite as high as durians, which are 175 to 440. And here we're seeing around that 80 up to around the 150 mark here across different locations. And the vitamin that it's the highest in is the 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate vitamin, which is the one that your body can actually take in. And it's the natural, there's a few different natural forms of folate, quite a few actually, but this is the one that's the best for you. So it's really the most bioactive folate. I've also studied it to understand how it changes during maturation and ripening. And I used MRI scans, which show this real change that we see here through the ripening process in the flesh. It gives us a really good visual of what's going on in the fruit without actually having to destroy the fruit to get the photos like what I had to do here. So I'm in the process of doing quite a lot of different studies, or I've done them, but I'm in the process of analysing the data of all the changes during maturation and as they ripen. And I wanted to share this slide because I took this slide up to the Aboriginal community, and I guess I didn't realise how much interest would come from this one slide, but it makes sense because most of them are they've got plant nurseries happening. So they're actually looking at seeds and growing the seeds and the interest. So I thought I'd share this because I was probably more interested in some of the other science, but this was, I guess, actually one of the most useful things for them, was to know that if they harvest 1 kilogram of green plums, that's 1,030 green plums, because they're very small, only about 1 gram each. You get about 800 grams of flesh, 200 grams of seed, and if you were to dry each of those, you get from 1 kilogram of green plums, you'll get 240 grams of freeze-dried flesh powder. So the next challenges for the green plum studies are to continue to do all of my data analysis. I've done some NMR, and we've also looked using FTIC-RMS to understand metabolites in the green plums as they change during maturity. So I have a lot of data analysis to do with that. And then to be able to communicate these results in a meaningful and also a COVID safe way, because I don't know that we're going to be able to get up to the community. But looking at how to do that, looking at the differences through maturity and location. And you can kind of see on our pictures of the spectra here that there is quite a bit of change as it matures. And my thesis review is in July, so I'm right in the midst of doing all of this. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of the people who are involved in this study, to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands, again, especially the Yolngu people and the Hewitt family and their people. To also acknowledge that I have an RTP training program scholarship and the ARC Training Centre for Uniquely Australian Foods. Yeah.
Thank you, Selina. That's fantastic. So we have a Q&A time now, and some people have popped their questions in the chat. I'm sorry, everyone. Tyne reminded me that I somehow said this seminar goes from 12 till 2. It doesn't. It finishes at 1. So we've got a good half an hour for discussion. If there's enough questions coming through, we can have a great discussion with Selina now. So please pop them through. There are a couple to get started with here, Selina. I'm not sure if you can see them as well. Someone just wanted you to clarify. So the green plum, is that a different species to Kakadu plum?
Yes, and it's probably one of the most confusing things. Green plum is different species. Kakadu plum is Terminalia fernandiana, and it's the one that's really high in vitamin C. So green plum is Buchanania obovata, and it's the one, you can remember it, it's the one that's high in folate. So yes, they do grow in similar areas though. They have a different harvest time. So some of the communities who already harvest the Kakadu plum are interested in adding green plum to their repertoire of fruit that they harvest.
Sure, and they do look similar as a little fruit, don't they? The Kakadu plum's kind of like a little bit of a pear shape, but the green plum's a bit more like an olive shape, but they're a similar colour. They're both green. So they are, but Kakadu's a little bit bigger, of course, as well. Yeah. When you freeze dried the green plum, was there any impact on the nutritional value after freeze drying?
That's actually how we do our nutrition studies. But we do it because that essentially gives us the best way of studying nutrition is as a freeze dried powder.
Yep.
So,
yep. Would you expect there to be much of a difference?
I don't know if there would be. No, I would say. But so the ones that we've freeze dried, we've taken, I guess, really good care of them. We've frozen them straight away. We've kept them frozen. They freeze to -80. Yeah.
Definitely, as you said, that's the way that we prepare them for analysis anyway. And I think there's been enough studies to show that that the difference isn't too big. Certain things can change slightly chemically when you do freeze dry. I certainly think about that as from a flavour perspective. There's certain ways to prepare and not to prepare, but most of the research and the comparisons that we make are on similarly prepared products. So the comparative value, while it may not be absolutely exact, it's usually quite close and an excellent comparison, isn't it? Have you studied any other common food processing treatments for the green plum? And have you had any look at how those nutrients might be changing or the composition might be changing depending on how you process?
No, I haven't. We've had to, we haven't been able to. I guess this has really just been that first initial study to understand it better. We would like
limitations on the amount of fruit that you had, and
quite a lot of limitations on the amount of fruit we have, and then not being able to go up the last harvest season because of COVID. We haven't been able to do the storage trial that we would like to do.
Absolutely.
Either.
So it really is a first look-see, isn't it? So some freeze-dried powder and some purees that you've looked at, and that's about as exciting as we can get. A comment here, thanks for your great presentation. How do you address the question of consistency in the quality of green plums for the commercial markets considering they're wild harvested? Did you see much variation? Were you looking at much variation across the different fruits? Obviously region to region, and you had some seasons.
There's been some variation. There's still, like, we're still seeing like high folates across different locations. And the other nutrients we see, like the high potassium, those kind of things. There is definitely differences, including in size as well, and weight and things like that.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to do, there's been issues with actually getting ripe samples from different locations too.
For sure. And not being able to travel the past year makes it difficult as well to have gone and hand collected those yourselves. You're relying on other people to do that for you. At the Gulkula nursery, was there a particular, I guess, cultivar of green plum that they were growing there, or were they cloning? At the nursery.
They go out and because it's a mine. And they're rehabilitating the land after it, so they go out and they harvest seed from the green plum trees in their area, and then they replant those seeds.
Okay. So it was the natural seeds that they were finding, so the natural variation that's there was going back out. In addition to use and propagation during the early stages of product development, are the seeds of any commercial value? Because there is a big seed, Selina, in the green plum, isn't there?
Yeah, there is a big seed. It's very hard as well.
It is.
Which makes it very awkward. It does have a fairly high iron content too, which is interesting. I think that's probably something, I guess, for later on, is to understand whether it can be used commercially.
And you measured the seed as well, didn't you, in terms of, I mean, there's is this, when you pound up the seed, is that edible? I don't know. I've got no idea.
Yeah, no, and it does, they do sometimes pound up seeds and eat them with the flesh too. Yeah,
for sure. Well, that's all the questions that I can see in the chat, unless there's any others, Tyne, that you can see coming through. Oh, there's one on the other, the Q&A button, and then the chat function. Let me check there too. There's a question here. Did the folate content reduce after storage?
We haven't done a storage trial.
That was that last one you didn't get to do. And what are the best storage conditions? That's a tricky answer too. Didn't
I would love to know. I think that would be a very interesting study to do. I would have loved to have done it. But,
and quite a challenge, wasn't it, getting those the fruit from those remote locations, and then to make sure that they're still fit for human consumption by the time they get to Brisbane, coming from a very hot area and having to get them cool quite quickly. And it was thawed frozen plums that we assessed, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Which has its implications.
We did do a little assessment on that in the first year on the fresh plums, on the sensory qualities, but that's all we were able to do.
Another question, I don't know the answers to some of these, but I'll ask them anyway. What are the current market channels for selling green plums? Are you aware of anything locally in Northern Territory that where they were selling those green plums? Or I know there's no markets down here.
No, and I know that there's certainly interest in it. But yeah, early stages. I would say though, it would probably, I guess, follow that same kind of path that the Kakadu plum has used, which is that model of the communities developing it and processing and being able to commercialise themselves.
Yeah, sure, and selling it then as a powder or as an ingredient for other foods rather than necessarily fresh whole fruit.
Yeah.
And here's a comment, is the community wanting, it's a bit based on what you just talked about, is the community wanting to sell fruit for processing trials? We're a native Oz Bush Foods Indigenous owned Queensland business and have a small retail range and would love to try this fruit.
It tastes really good. It's definitely worth trying, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's certainly interest in developing the bush food market.
Yeah. Yeah, and so these communities are, this is the purpose of this project really, is to try and look for opportunities for these communities and to help them,
Yeah.
move
Because it
in
was
that direction.
completely unstudied as well. So I guess this is that real first understanding of it as a food, as a nutrition source. And then, yeah, trying to, I guess, develop that vocabulary about the flavours and the sensory qualities as well.
Absolutely. So there's obviously some technical challenges to overcome in terms of developing it then as a product ready for the market, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
That's all the questions we seem to have at the moment. Quite a journey your PhD has been, Selina, hasn't it? Looking back, what do you think? I guess what was one of the most enjoyable aspects of your research in this area? I mean, it sounds, when you talk about this, it reminds me how complex the whole area is in terms of making sure you're following the rules and doing things ethically. And perhaps that's a bit off-putting for people, but what have you enjoyed most about it?
I've enjoyed engagement with the Indigenous communities. I really like that. I like that these fruit grow in Australia. They're here already, and we know they're food. So being able to find out that it's high in folate and is find out those kind of things is really exciting. And I like as well, I guess, to be able to that whole concept of responsible research to understand how it all fits together and how to do things right. Is very interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, probably as well, I guess. There's been challenges with some of the scientific studies because the green plums are very sticky. So being able to overcome those and be able to do that real high level science as well has been really interesting.
That's good. A couple more have just popped through here. I think we've answered that one, current market channels. And what were the challenges in getting the fruit for analysis other than COVID? Were there environmental challenges?
Yes. So one of the challenges has been that on a tree, they don't all ripen at the same time. So kind of, I guess, actually trying to get the right fruit. If you're just trying to harvest a lot of fruit, it's actually really difficult in some ways. So I guess, and then, understanding the fruit more. And it's really hot and really humid and really remote where they grow too.
Yeah, right.
So that's a challenge in itself.
And to get access to fridges and freezers quickly if you're out on food or whatnot, that's quite a challenge. It
is, yeah. Yep.
Well, I think that's all, Selina. I think that's all the questions. Tyne, are you happy for me to wrap that up there? Or is it, unless there's any more challenges coming? Yep. Next slide, please, Selina. You've still got the control. I just need to give a plug for the next seminar, which is Alex Wu on the 23rd of March. Please come and listen to his seminar, Stimulating Crop Improvement with Plant Crop Models. So stay tuned to that. And also I just wanted to do a small plug for those of you who might have missed it on International Women's Day, QAAFI and UQ put together a great little discussion between Yasmina and Honorary Professor Henrietta Marie. And Tyne might pop that link in the chat function for everyone to go and listen to that. But that's she's really very interesting lady, and she's now working with us as part of the Nuclear Australian Foods Training Centre and leading, I guess, our Indigenous Advisory Committee and helping us appropriately engage with Indigenous communities that we're working with on our training centre. But she's an amazing woman and has a great wealth of experience, and she's very humble and kind. And I hope you get an opportunity to go and have a look at that discussion that's been recorded, and that link's just popped up now. Other than that, Tyne, do I have anything else that I'm supposed to let people know? Selina, thank you so much. Really not easy to give a Zoom presentation with no eyes looking at you and no feedback from the audience. So well done, you did a great job. Thanks everyone, and stay tuned for the next QAAFI Science Seminar on the 23rd. Bye.